For the Protestants of North Belfast, the day was dominated by the funeral of 14-year-old Desmond Guiney, killed after his father's milk float had been hijacked. In the violent hours after the death of Bobby Sands, the rioters had even continued to stone the ambulance men as they fought to save him. Several thousand turned out to follow the cortege across North Belfast, bitterly resenting the greater emphasis the world has placed on the IRA hunger strikers. Desmond's mother had no husband to comfort her. He's still unconscious as a result of the attack that killed his son. Though the child's death was central here, the wider resentments in this community were strongly evident. Mr. Paisley's presence was no surprise. In a country with more than its fair share of atrocities, Desmond's death was particularly nasty. His burial, coming as the result of the death of one hunger striker and only hours before another, served to underline the growing sense of hopelessness on both sides of the sectarian divide. John Snow, News at 10, Belfast.
In Belfast, the funeral took place of 14-year-old Desmond Guiney, who died during rioting which followed the death of Bobby Sands. A man of 26 has been charged with his manslaughter. The boy died after his father's milk float was stoned in the New Lodge area of Belfast. Kate Adey reports.
Desmond Guiney was a direct victim of the street violence triggered by Bobby Sands' death. He was on his way back to school, getting a lift to the bus station in his father's milk lorry, when rioters rained stones on them. A brick hit Desmond's father. The lorry crashed. The stone throwing went on long after the accident. Then the lorry was set on fire. In this incident, as in most of the week's rioting, children were involved.
Well, I just plead to the parents to keep their kids in, because I don't want their parents to go through what I'm going through. That's all.
Do you think they'll listen to you?
I hope and pray to God they do listen to me.
Another victim of the violence after the death last week of the first hunger striker, Bobby Sands, has died. Eric Guiney, a Belfast milkman, died in hospital this afternoon, the day after his 14-year-old son Desmond was buried. Both were injured when Mr. Guiney's milk float was stoned.
Up in Protestant North Belfast, Mrs. Guiney, who buried her 14-year-old son yesterday, was told today that her husband too had died. Mr. Guiney had been delivering milk with his son on the morning after the death of Bobby Sands. Both he and the boy, Desmond, had been in the milk float as it crashed after being attacked by H-Block protesters.
The father and son, attacked by rioters after the death of the hunger striker Bobby Sands, are now both dead. The Rathcoole milkman Eric Guiney, whose 14-year-old son Desmond was buried yesterday, died in hospital this afternoon. Peter Gould reports.
Mr. Guiney and his son were both critically injured when their milk float was attacked by a gang of stone throwers at the junction of the Antrim Road and the New Lodge Road. The incident happened early on Tuesday morning last week, only hours after the death of Bobby Sands. As the rioters hurled missiles at the milk float, Mr. Guiney was apparently struck on the head by a brick. The vehicle crashed, but the hail of stones continued, even as rescuers tried to free the father and son from the wreckage. Mr. Guiney, who was 45, never regained consciousness after the attack and was not aware that his son Desmond died from his injuries last Friday. It was only yesterday that his funeral took place. A crowd of more than 1,500 people gathered outside the family home at Rathcoole to express their sorrow. Desmond was the first victim of the disturbances following the deaths of the two hunger strikers. His mother, Mrs. Roberta Guiney, urged parents to make sure their children stayed off the streets to prevent a repetition of the tragedy. Before the death of her husband, doctors at the Royal Victoria Hospital tried to bring him out of his coma by playing tape-recorded messages from the family. But Mr. Guiney did not come round and died this afternoon.